On Father's Day, my daughter slapped me across the face and called me her mom's ex-husband, while labeling her new stepfather her true dad. Her betrayal shattered 28 years of unwavering love. But one quiet sentence from me left her in tears, pleading for forgiveness. Before we go on, please subscribe to the channel and drop a comment about what time it is in your corner of the world right now. The knife halted mid-slice as her voice cut through the air. I had been dicing onions for my evening stew, the steady rhythm against the wooden board echoing in the still kitchen. Steam curled up from the pot on the stove, carrying the warm aroma of beef broth and quiet evenings. Then the phone buzzed, slicing into my simple routine like a sudden storm. Emily! My shoulders tensed at once. Perhaps she was reaching out just to talk, to share a bit of her day the way daughters once did, the way they ought to. Hi, Dad. Her tone held that familiar edge of detachment I had come to fear. Listen, I can swing by for this Father's Day gathering of yours, but I won't be able to linger. I laid the knife aside with care, wiping my hands on the towel looped through my belt. The rising steam from the stew now felt oppressive, closing in. Of course. Emily, I'd love to see you. I pushed warmth into my words, the kind I'd practiced over lonely months, even if it's only for a short spell. Sure, she replied flatly. I'll probably pull up around noon on Sunday, but I have to head out by 2. I told Mom and Edward I'd lend a hand with their backyard barbecue. Their backyard barbecue, not our Father's Day. I stirred the stew with one hand, the wooden spoon tracing slow eddies through the chunks of potato and carrot. It felt unnaturally heavy in my grasp. That does sound nice, I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. I was planning your favorite pot roast, the one with the rosemary rub. Remember how we'd devour it back in the day? Just skip that overcooked ham from the old recipes. All right, it was tough as leather. She chuckled, but it rang hollow, without a trace of joy. I'd never served ham for Father's Day, not in all our years. Pointing that out would only widen the rift, so I let it slide. Naturally. I said, I'll whip up something truly special. I lowered the flame under the pot, stalling for a breath to steady my thoughts. We could flip through those family scrapbooks while you're here. I dug out the ones from your early school days. Dad, I truly can't hang around long, she insisted. 2 hours tops, and that's stretching it. 2 hours. After months of dodged calls and clipped texts, 2 hours was my allotment. I leaned against the counter, struck by the vast emptiness of my kitchen. One pot simmering by the burner, one bowl prepped on the sill, one life, pared down to essentials. 2 hours will be just right, I fibbed, my voice steady despite the ache. We'll cherish every minute. Good, she said briskly. And Dad, let's keep it breezy. You know I don't want the afternoon bogged down in your troubles or anything like that. My troubles. As if the ache of missing her was merely a footnote in some endless ledger. I shut my eyes, breathing deep to 3, just as my counselor had advised. Definitely. I agreed. A calm, easy visit all around. Perfect. All right. I have to run. Edward's paging me for supper. Edward's paging her. At 6:30 on a Tuesday, she was breaking bread with my former wife and her fresh spouse, the fellow who had edged me out in ways that stung deepest. Send my best to your mother, I offered, the phrase sour on my tongue. Will do. Catch you Sunday. Dad. The call ended abruptly. Before I could muster a farewell, I clutched the phone, its silence blending with the soft simmer from the stove. The onions on my board had started to wilt at the edges, half cut and forsaken. much like the fragments of my days. The stew demanded attention. I had counters to scrub, invoices to tally, a string of chores that padded my solitary nights. Yet for a stretched instant, I couldn't stir. I gripped that mute device and gazed at my reflection in the shadowed window over the sink. 2 hours. After all we'd woven together, all we'd endured, I merited 2 hours. At last. I set the phone down and returned to the board. The knife felt awkward now, leaden in my hold, but I resumed chopping. Each cut measured with the exactness honed over 38 years as a draftsman. Old patterns cling tight. Even as the world unravels, the stew would simmer done in 15 minutes. I'd savor it solo, as ever, while scheming a feast for a daughter eager to depart. I let the stew burn, let the chunks scorch if they must. Emily's words lingered in the air, that offhand brush-off slicing sharper than any blunt dismissal. I wandered to the den, pulled by an unnamed pull. The photo binder rested on the lowest shelf of my cabinet, right where I'd stowed it after my prior dive into bittersweet recall. My fingers grazed the worn cover of the earliest volume before I drew it out. Faint motes swirled in the lamp's glow as I eased into my armchair. 4 years back, the ground shifted under me, lost my position, then my household. The litany played in my head with rote ease. I'd recited it to shrinks, to mirrors, to these bare walls until it smoothed like polished pebbles. But this evening, it cut fresh, raw anew. I parted the binder to a snapshot from 2021, our final true holiday together. Laura wore the emerald scarf I'd gifted her. Emily looped an arm over my shoulder, and we all beamed with unfeigned delight before Edward, before the drafting office trimmed me loose, before our bonds frayed like worn cord. The separation decree waited in the adjacent study, tucked in my desk with the rest of the relics marking my prior era's close. I could summon its image without a glance. Cream stock paper, ink smudges from that grim dawn in the attorney's suite. My script still firm and assured, even as my footing crumbled. 58 when they cut me adrift, too seasoned to reboot, too vital to fade away. The payout stretched 6 months. 6 months firing off applications that vanished into ether. While I watched Laura's forbearance fade like mist at dawn. She'd begun staying late at the office, reading circles that spilled into the wee hours. Extended chats she fielded in hushed corners, her timbre lighter, almost girlish. When she confessed about Edward, shock evaded me. Only hollowness remained. He revives the spark in me, she'd claimed, as though 26 years wedded had dimmed her essence rather than kindled it. He spots promise in me, unlike certain others. It seemed, the fellow who'd logged extra hours to fund her master's program, who'd toasted each modest triumph, each step up the ladder, each glimpse of her fire. Yet promise proved a frill we couldn't sustain once my wage vanished. I turned more pages, Emily at 8, gap-toothed and radiant by the swing set I'd assembled. Emily at 14, scoffing at my corny quips, yet cracking a grin through it. Emily at 23, phoning for counsel on her debut career leap, her lilt alive with faith. When did that faith start to splinter? It crept in gradual, like corrosion on steel. Conversations shortened. Drop-ins turned dutiful rather than eager. She quit seeking my take and echoed Edward's counsel instead. The thriving executive who'd filled the chasm my joblessness carved. The brewer gurgled in the kitchen, a cue I'd set for my nightly ritual. I'd brooded on autopilot as my union dissolved, as Emily's allegiance tilted toward a man who delivered what I could not: assurance, poise, a path free of doubts. I fetched another binder, this from Emily's university stint. Her diploma shot captured her glowing between us, my arm at her side, Laura clasping her other palm. We'd seemed a squad then, a clan forged solid. A year on, Laura wed again. Half a year later, Emily dubbed Edward her extra parent. That label twisted my gut each time, as if dads were swappable fixtures you traded when the first wore thin. The court files weighed heavy as I fished them from the drawer. Visitation terms for a grown child, as though affection could slot into calendars like boardroom slots. Asset splits that granted me scraps of zilch. Spousal support math presuming I'd snag a gig matching my old pay. I never did. The home groaned softly around me, a 58-year-old's chorus of isolation. I fanned the images over my side table like oracle tiles, seeking omens in countenances once brimming with boundless warmth. One frame stalled me. Emily at 5. Strawberry ice cream daubed on her chin. Her wee fist locked in mine as we strolled the paths of the San Diego Zoo. I'd been her champion then, her guardian, her foremost bond. Now I ranked as the duty she slotted before weightier calls, the sidelined sire she endured from habit, not heart. I bundled most shots back into their slots with meticulous care, but clutched that zoo print, angling it to the light. Emily's toothy beam gazed up. Innocent and wholly mine. 2 hours on Sunday. I'd seize what came. The print quivered in my fingers as I sank further into the seat. Emily couldn't have topped 5 in that capture. Strawberry ice cream streaked her face like a badge of mischief. Her small digits clutched mine with utter reliance as we paused by the giraffe yard. I recalled that outing vividly. How she'd squealed at the flamingo flock's strut. How she'd clamored for a piggyback ride clear to the lot. "You're my caped crusader. Daddy," she'd proclaimed that sunlit afternoon. Her limbs looped round my neck as I toted her across the asphalt. "You're the mightiest guy on earth. The mightiest guy." I nearly barked a wry laugh at the cruel twist. By 10, she'd championed me to peers ribbing my vintage Chevy. "My pop's ride is classic," she'd declared with fierce grit, jaw set like a pint-sized sentinel. "It's got soul." She'd claimed my tenacious vein, that iron will when stakes rose. High school tested us differently, but she sought me out foremost. Lad woes, campus bids, vocation visions. I served as her echo chamber, her sage guide. Even when Laura waved off her aims as pie in the sky, Emily would track me to my garage, hop on my workbench, and map her aspirations like schematics. "You always back me, Dad," she'd confided in one such midnight huddle. Even when doubt clouds my own view, I set the photo aside and roamed the rooms, brushing relics tied to those echoes. The breakfast nook where she'd scribbled essays as I simmered supper. The parlor nook where she'd sawed violin runs, grating our ears with rasps till melody bloomed. Clear and true. In my wardrobe nook, I unearthed the carton brimming with Father's Day notes she'd crafted across the years. Newsprint blooms in bold hues, scrawled script proclaiming me top dad in waxy caps. Each bore her looping mark, as if her young flourish bore a sovereign's seal. She once hailed me hero. Where went that sprite? The reply hid in nearer recollections, the sorts I skirted close inspection. Emily at 26, weighing my words against Edward's sharper ones. Emily at 28, soliciting my stake for her condo bid. Yet noting Edward had fronted the bulk. Emily at 30. The initial instance she termed him nearer to a proper parent. That barb landed like a gut punch. I'd reared her from age 2, When Laura and I claimed her from the foster circuit, schooled her on two wheels, cheered every stage recital, vigil kept through flus or phantoms or adolescent aches, yet in scant 2 years, a newcomer who'd bankrolled his entry had eclipsed the dad who'd cherished her boundlessly for nearly 3 decades. The oven chime pealed from afar, my neglected stew likely charred by now, but indifference gripped me. I drowned in the methodical crumble of what I'd deemed eternal. Edward wielded assets I'd never grasped, funds for lavish getaways, ties for job climbs, the suave ease born of unchallenged status. When Emily earned her business degree, he'd hosted her bash at his lakeside club in Michigan. When she climbed the ranks, he'd whisked her to feasts at bistros I couldn't spell, much less bankroll. I'd tendered what lay at hand: home-cooked spreads, rambling hikes, the reliable nearness that evades Instagram gloss. But reliable nearness paled against Napa Valley jaunts or summit mixers with sector titans. The slide quickened post my layoff. Emily's rings grew terser, her stops more rote. She'd materialize for mandated feast days and pass the span thumbing alerts, dodging summons from her expanded kin about glitzier schemes. I morphed into the opener for the headliner. Now I plotted Sunday's spread with a gambler's focus. A soul low on wagers, her childhood treats, rosemary roasted spuds, corn pudding, the peanut butter treats she'd aid in mixing. Perhaps nostalgic bites would stir nostalgic ties, jog her to our shared roots. I'd hauled out the fine dishware, the sweet Laura had abandoned, laid 2 spots at the oak board like a dreamer or a dupe. I couldn't tell which. 2 hours. In 2 hours, I'd distilled 28 years of parenting into a sliver Emily might recall with fondness. The mantel clock tolled 9:15. Bedtime loomed. Rest before my weekend of fragile optimism. But slumber shunned me this night. I doused the light, zoo print still fisted, and mounted the steps. Emily's chamber lingered at the corridor's end, frozen as she'd quit it 4 years past. Some nights I'd hover in the frame and chase the warmth of her dwelling here, when hearth meant homing to me. 2 hours to affirm I still counted. 2 hours to vie against years of subtle decay. I ascended deliberate, joints grumbling at the hour. Dawn would bring market runs for fixings, a scrub till the place gleamed, preps for my girl's fleeting reclaim of the nest she'd shed. But this eve, I just cradled her image and pondered if devotion sufficed, when all else had faltered. The following midday caught me knee-deep in my front yard, warring weeds with undue fury. I'd replayed Tuesday's exchange that morn, dissecting each syllable for veiled barbs. 2 hours. She'd framed it as a boon, doling her span like rare elixir. Yet she was en route. That much solace lingered. A vehicle's slam froze me over a tenacious thistle. No callers slated. Parcels hit the porch. Through the slats in my picket fence, I spied navy gleam, Emily's BMW. My pulse thrummed as I dropped the spade and scoured loam from my palms with the cloth in my pocket. She never arrived ahead, never unheralded. I circled the bungalow to spot her marching my flagstone path, briefcase swinging, clad in a crisp jacket screaming boardroom. Her pumps tapped my weathered stoop with crisp cadence. Dad. She halted at the threshold, eyeing my turf-flecked shins and grime-rimed nails. We must discuss this in earnest. Absolutely, darling. I jiggled my latch, abruptly conscious of my entry's peeling veneer beside her sleek poise. Do come inside. She claimed the sofa and unfurled her case with fluid grace. Spreadsheets and plots cascaded over my side table like war maps, her gaze ignited with a zeal I hadn't glimpsed in ages. I've crafted something groundbreaking. Dad, a web promo firm for neighborhood ventures. She tapped a vivid wedge graph. The niche lies wide open. Mom-and-pop outlets, corner trades, diner spots, they're all flailing online. I bent close, hooked despite the puzzle of her ambush drop-in. That rings solid. You've ever eyed gaps like a hawk? Spot on. I've snagged 4 leads already from casual chats. She leafed to a fresh sheet flaunting earnings forecasts. Modest gauges peg me at 7 figures in 12 months. The figures blurred in my sight. Recurring dues, outreach spends, yield edges, the jargon of triumph in a realm past my drafting roots. This dazzles. Emily, truly does. I trailed the climbing arc with a digit. But how does this tie to... I require $150,000 for launch. The plea struck like a gale. My mug quaked in my clasp. Brew slopping the brim. 150. I steadied it down gentle, bartering seconds to absorb. That's a hefty stake. She bobbed already, dredging further sheets. Suite rental for 18 months. Gear pro grade. Launch promo kitty. Setup council fees. It's tallied to the cent. My lips worked mute for beats. The sums swelled in the hush, bloating till they crammed my den. Dad, I get it's steep, but this window slams shut soon. She edged in, timber urgent, squeezing my lungs. Arrival outfits circling the same turf. Stall now, and they scoop my marks. Have you pitched lenders? Venture credits I queried on reflex. Brain spinning wild. Lenders crave track records. Pledges I lack. You know their tight-fisted startup stance. She flicked it off. But kin backing's distinct. It's faith in spark over raw ledgers. Kin backing, as if my draftsman's nest egg rivaled Vanderbilt's. I've crunched all angles, Dad, even keel by cycle 10, flush gains by 16, no whims here, grounded in field scans. She pressed on, cadence building as she sketched outreach ploys and edge plays. I dipped nods at cues, hummed support, but inwardly tallied frantic. 150,000. My full hoard topped 40,000. Liquidate all, hawk goods, perhaps clawed 55,000. So, your verdict. She reclined, orbs alight with hope. I studied her vibrant mien, the meated prep blanketing my table. This girl who yet leaned on me for aid. Her bets bore down on my breastbone. I'll puzzle it through. Love. Her beam lit the room like dawn. Knew you'd deliver. You always have. She scooped docks with brisk sweeps. Need word by Sunday. Monday tops. The lease evaporates fast. Sunday. Father's Day. The twist didn't escape me. I grasp. Urgent shots demand swift calls. I aided her tidy, limbs on cruise while my skull raced dead ends. She rose, ironing her jacket. Thanks, Dad. This seals it for me. At last, I can show my mettle. I trailed her to the portal, viewing her assured gait to her ride. She wheeled at the wheel and fluttered, visage aglow with trust I'd conjure the unfeasible. The BMW vanished round the bend, stranding me in my frame with her blueprint gripped in my loam-smeared fists. The noon blaze pierced too keen. The quiet suburb too absolute. 150,000. I'd vowed my girl the stars when I scraped for matches. The blueprint dragged heavier with each stride to my cubby. I sealed the entry and strode the passage, skirting clan frames that jeered with iced eras of fiscal ease. My nook was merely the tiniest chamber repurposed post-split. When the grander abode proved unaffordable, the oak slab groaned as I dropped into the seat, arraying Emily's files by my creaky laptop. As it wheezed awake, I fished specs and cracked the locker-tagged accounts. 40,000. That looped since her exit. But ink on ledger knotted my innards. 4 years of stern thrift since the parting. Each pinch, each waved dine-out, each deferred buy fed this slim bulwark. My core till showed $2,912, doled tight to bridge pension pulses. The reserve vaulted 15,800. My badge against crises. In the wee vault at my back. 3,200 greenbacks for off-grid needs. Some fluids. 39,912. Call it 40 grand, 95 short. I summoned my nest fund next. Browser crawling. 95,600 blinked back. But it dangled remote as Mars. Premature taps would devour near 40%. Plus IRS grilling on woes. My battered reckoner's keys clicked under pads as I spun sums that balked betterment. Dwelling stake, say 72,000. But flipping dragged quarters and left me adrift. My Ford fetched maybe 6,000 trade-in. The cast-offs Laura ditched might yield a couple thou at yard sales. Total wipeout still lagged Emily's mark. I probed each till methodical, verifying sums etched in memory. The sluggish web made loads drag like verdicts nearing in sloth. Each tally sealed what instinct knew from her plea. 150 lay beyond grasp. The slant beam through my nook pane lit specks waltzing o'er account stacks. I'd beamed at these humble holds once. Post-split rebuild to 40 grand a feet. Now it screamed shortfall. I recalled inking the reserve at the local branch 4 years gone. The clerk toasting my fresh slate. Each drop deliberate. 180 here, 450 there. Kin gifts, stray gigs from sketchwork. Tracking that climb from nil mended some pride in my thinning realm. Emily once marveled at lesser nods. 5 grand for her starter wheels stake. 2 grand on lease bumps. Even 700 sparked thanks and lingering lines of warmth. But pre-Edward, pre-glimpses of true coin's sway. I lifted the house line and eyed the dial. Adrift on first outreach. My roster had withered with the rest post-rift. Ex-peers dispersed by cuts and moves. Neighbors I nodded past. Kin wrestling their ledgers. The vault cradled more than bills. Deed to my plot. Coverage docs. Pop's bequest. Proofs of what I'd salvaged. Yet pooled. They spanned no chasm twixt her visions and my truths. My dawn brew chilled by the slab. A rust halo where the cup wept. The panel ticked toward 4. Each tick hauling me nearer Sunday's brink. I shoved from the slab and kneaded lids under frames. Screen digits smeared, but the arithmetic stayed pitiless. 40 grand at beck. Perhaps 15 more via fire sales and bites. Still futile, but I'd pledged Emily a fix. She'd sped off, sure in my knack for wonders, as dads ought, as I'd finagled afore when snags scaled smaller and cures neared. I seized my stub and scrawled on a pad, as if my script unveiled overlooked paths. 150 sought, 40 on tap, 90 gap, the void sprawled vaster scripted. Saturday dawn pinned me at the galley slab with brew, roster, and ebbing faith. Friday dusk I'd listed every soul who might aid. Slumber fled, and I'd stirred pre-light to brace for what loomed life's pivot. The Joe bit strong, sinews frayed, but fuel steeled me for the fray. By 8:30, I trekked into First Union Bank, sheaf under arm like wards 'gainst sure rebuff. The credit rep, alas young as Emily's peer, scanned my sheaf with poised doubt masked scant. Regretfully, Mr. Jefferson, your score holds, but lacks shine. She nudged my report over. Sans fixed wage flow. Unbacked credits this scale prove mighty tough to greenlight. I'd braced for this, but voiced. It ribbed like a haymaker to the ribs. What of dwelling line taps feasible? But apps drag 3 to 5 weeks norm. Rush cuts to 2 weeks bare. She eyed her display. Plus fresh plot valuation, wage proofs, debt ratios. 2 weeks. Emily craved verdict by Sunday. By 10. I motored crosstown to link with Tom, my old drafting mate. We'd teamed 15 years ere the trim flung us wide. The diner he'd picked sat sparse, harsh bulbs humming o'er cracked booths of yore. Grant. I'd pitch in if able, but belts cinch universal. Tom's spoon chased his Joe uneasy, gaze averted. Lisa's clinic tabs last spring gutted our pot. I could stretch 1,005, push to $2,000 maybe. 1,005. I thanked sincere, but the tally felt like ladling seas with a thimble. The haul to Rick's pad clocked 35 minutes or cookie-cutter lanes. Rick roomed with me in undergrad, stood best at my tie with Laura, if any grasped, him. His den warmed sans flash, clan shots flaunting grandkids unmet. We'd drifted post-split, bonds fray when fates reshuffle. $4,000. He ventured post my pitch on Emily's plight. Realistic cap, but fortnight to cash bonds sans deep gouge. Fortnight fresh deadline in a dawn of barriers. Wish more in my kit. Grant. Steep haul to muster swift. He saw me out. Brow knit. Ever Wade scaling her launch modest. Grind up to that scope, but Emily dreamed Edward's scale. Bold strokes, tight clocks, wins tallied in 7 digits or cautious climbs. The pawn joint perched on a block I'd wheeled by myriad sans note. Within, air hung dust and cast-offs. The keeper, gaunt with specks, probed Laura's trinket chest detached. The bead's foe, perhaps 300. He shelved 'em, hefted my sire's ticker lot. These Seikos from the 80s could fetch 500 if ticks hold. I'd banked on thousands. He dangled hundreds. The nuptial dish hall sparked most buzz, nigh 1,800 whole for 8. But cradling those bowls, I spied Laura plating our debut feast eve. Some tolls too steep, whole kit, say $4,000 if you bide choosy hunts. He swept his clutter, but for haste cash, spot yield nears 2,005. I wheeled home in dusk slant, summing stubborn ciphers. Tom's May $2,000, Rick's 4 in fortnight, pawn tops 4 more. Max plays left me 40,000 shy. My lane loomed impasse. I idled in the coupe minutes. Reckon in fist, final spin, core stash, 40,000. Pal taps, 5,000. Relic yields, 4,000. Peak sum 49,000, still 91 short. The unyielding math pinned me. Torch all, summon debts, peddle all, and I'd crater shy of Emily's need. My bungalow shrank as I plodded to the stoop, bowed by tomorrow's duty to dash my girl's brightest hope. The blueprint idled on my side table, rife with arcs presuming her sire spun gold. But gold spins crave coffers I'd ne'er held. The wakeful gloom brimmed rehearsals for voicing my shortfall to Emily. I'd readied a modest Father's Day spread, wagering grace in my lay when I unpacked my bounds. The roast sliced, board for duo with prime ware, all staged to cushion my fiscal fumble. When the chime pealed prompt noon, I swabbed palms on the rag and neared the entry with pinned grin. At least 2 hours to unpack full. I swung the door, braced for my kin. 3 forms bulked my mat. My grip clamped the jam as the earth tilted. Emily shone midst, but bookending her stood Laura and Edward. My ex scanned uneasy, shunning my stare. The usurper who'd supplanted me wholesale eyed my lot with bare appraisal. Surprise. Dad. I fetched Mom and Edward. The line chilled like frost. I reeled a pace, my scripted noon melting to ordeal. Hey, Grant. Laura's lilt faked son. Hope it's no bother. Edward advanced song cue. Sweep o'er my humble foyer. Charming nook. Real snug. Snug. The tag for kid huts or rustic inns. Not a grown man's hold. No trouble at all. I heard echo, courtesy trumping stun. Do enter. They streamed past. My once ample space now choked. Edward prowled proprietorial, fingering a tome's edge, tweaking a frame, claiming my wing chair as native. Emily pirouetted room core, limbs wide. Isn't this ideal whole clan united for Father's Day? Whole her clan, the slip carved deep. Laura teetered sofa brink, bag clutched shield-like. Your dad's shaped this spot cozy. Emily, real livable. Fresh shrink word. Livable gear's what you claim when fine evades purse. I reckoned this men's all. Emily pressed, blind to the static humming. You see, kin ties, meshing closer. Meshing as if Edward and I strangers, not rivals for her core. I bolted to the galley, mind whirling. The roast might ration 4 via paper-thin fans. Veggies sufficed. Scant. I yanked spare bowls from racks with palsied grips. My intimate repast warped to ad-lib feast. Aid needed in there, Emily hailed. None. All fine. The untruth flowed smooth. Though chaos reigned, my noon, my chat, my pride, all commandeered by this raid. Through the arch, I clocked Edward probing my stacks, yanking tomes, scanning binds like valuer. He'd nudged my prized fixture to a side perch, seizing the glow nook by pain. Laura chattered locale banal, chime over bright. They wrapped that dig on elm last mess when I passed. When she passed. Gone tense. This turf hers no more. I bore libations on a salver that clinked faint in my clasp. Edward lounged rooted, soles on my low board, clicker-fisted through screen dark. This roast wafts grand, Laura chimed, taking her tumbler with digits dodging mine. You mastered fowl like none, fowls a tad parched, but fair for hearthcraft. Edward's tines probed methodical. Folks oft scorch it. Slip sans top kit. I fared well. Honed these 4 years. The retort edged defensive unmeant. Emily flashed curb while portioning neat bites. Odd you helm such spread solo, Edward mused. Scan o'er the chamber appraiser keen. The spread's modest scale, I countered wary. Ladling gravy with would-be quivers. Suits one fine. Yet all those chambers to warm come frost. Levies on a pad this span. He waved at my trim, gauging yardage. Thrift sense nods tighter quarters. Emily tittered. Chime keen in the press. Edward's ever on tweaks. Fuels his trade wins. Trade wins. Unlike her sire. Plain. Laura flung buoy. The block holds charm. Sure. Those maples hit 50 winters. Ripe greens hike worth. Edward concurred. Though I spy eaves need mend, and that entry slab's split budding, each note a pinprick placed true, my hold no mere nest, but ledger of lapse, a chap failing upkeep on his claim. I honed on fanning more roast, blade waiting per pass. The care spread fair gulped by folk stock-taking my stumbles. Dad crafts peak feast days, Emily claimed. Lilt faint on faith, recall that Thanksgiving corn. Mom, with pecans divine. Laura rushed. You weave such nuance. Nuances count, Edward noted. Lunging o'er me sans ask for pepper. Though oft wiser to hand off. Hired spreads free spans for prime pursuits. Prime over a sire stewing for kin. The hint dangled like crammed blooms reek. Emily eyed her screen, then beamed round bored content. This nails what I craved. All guardians synced or bites. All her guardians. The tag sealed my slide from sire to panel pier. A red would lift this apartment. Edward mused, glass-eyed askance. Fine cab from our Napa Hall. Our shared jaunts, wed words, joint claims on taste and roams. I'm light on vino these days. I owned, though marriage brimmed it. Coin curbs shifted it whim to prize. Pity. Vino lore unlocks realms. Edward's grin chilled. Deal sups, patron perks. Ties vital now. Now's arena I sat out, where my sort relics of cruder times. The prattle swirled round, through, scant roping me, like nod to aged kin. Emily sparked livelier, hashing her toil, schemes, sunlit path backed by now savvy folk. When sweets rose, Joe with market tart I'd stashed, I grasped the show dragged on. My pocket hummed anew. Tom's fourth ring, like urgent, but flight barred now. Post forsaken mid Edward's tally of my hearth and hoard lax. Joe fits grand. Emily ruled. Uprising to bus wear brisk. Dad, park it. Mom and I'll tidy. Even tidies commandeered in my realm. I lingered banished at boardtail while Edward lolled in my throne. Scan o'er seized ground smug. Ere long, Emily would cue the coin chat unfinished. And that crux, I'd bear my bust pre the chap who'd ousted me every way else that tallied. Joe Muggs voided round board as Emily clocked her band content. Let's extend a touch, she bid, resettling by Edward. Craft a true kin noon. The loaded peak they swapped chilled my veins. No whim welcome. Staged clock for sight unseen. Edward fished his coat with showy care. Digits on prize that curved his lip. The move bore right weight, like prestidigitator's capstone. Hold on. Emily, ere we nest in... He drew a creased draft with flair fit for spectacle. I've a gift here. The sheet crisped as he laid it my board, by the Joe Blot creeping wood. Upside down, the sum leaped clear in his bold hand. 150,000. Emily, this draft 150 for your venture. Her inhale raw, palms clamped maw stunned. She hadn't schemed this ploy, unsynced on his bid. Edward, I can't fathom. She vaulted seat and flung limbs round his neck, cheek to his pauldron. Thanks. Dad, you're the true parent, true parent. The barb outpunched flesh, I gawked the draft. My slim 40 grand neon of want. I've 40 grand tucked. The plea slipped unchecked, meek and starved in the drop hush. Emily wheeled on me, visage morphing joy to raw scorn laced with piled letdowns, all honed on my quaver. 40 grand, she barked. Barren mirth. That's your span. That's what 28 years parenting yields me. I sought to unpack lenders, pals tapped, relics gauged, but she surged with dread zeal. You ne'er cherished me. The charge burst force. All spans I deemed care. But you can't match what Edward tenders thoughtless. Emily, dear, that's not... Edward's my true sire. He shows daily while you molder in this drab nook pinching coppers. The swat blurred swift, scarce spied. The snap boomed my tight chamber like crack, chased by blaze on cheek and copper bite where molar nicked gum. The hush absolute followed. The aged bones hushed too. Laura inhaled sharp, palm to lips aghast. Edward iced in seat, stunned that his strut sparked fury. Emily loomed, bosom labored with zeal, palm yet warm from strike. I held seat. Dome canted from jolt. Sensing heat bloom face, the Joe toppled in my startle. adding muck to the stain sprawl on cloth. Such trifling note in a pivot all. Slow. I fished my kerchief and patted the gum seep. The cloth bloomed crimson, proof of my girl's end spurn. 28 years of dusk tales, patched grazes, glee at recitals and rites, all voided in one fierce swipe. But as I sat copper-tanged, blaze on jowl, a core flip stirred. The strike aimed to end me, prove my nil in her weave. It unbound my last tether. Loosing my keenest thrust, I rose measured. Stature full sans the bruise. Emily held bold preemie. Sure she wielded all sway. Edward viewed from poached perch, glee dulled by fury's wake. Laura eyed her spawn with bloom dread, spying alien in Emily's shell. The draft lay slighted on board, its ciphers moot now, for I clutched worth past coin, truth to recast all Emily deemed of bonds. Kin, true siring, I swabbed the gum seep deliberate. Each sweep reclaimed poise the swat stole. The chamber held breath. Emily towered in wrath crown, convinced she'd felled our link. Edward sat stilled in my seat. Strut dimmed as strike sank. Laura watched her with swell horror, at last sighting the edge under gloss. I drew tall and met Emily's gaze square, timbre firm o'er the tang. You're spot on. Emily, I'm not your blood sire. The line smoked air post-blast. Emily's bold mask faltered. Haze chasing wrath crown. What mean you I let quiet draw? Clocking grasp dawn in her orbs. 28 years veil poised to shard in scant lines. We fetched you from the shelter at 2. Her hue drained. The strike palm now shook chest clasp. Impossible. You're spinning. Mom, bid him false. Laura's streams traced cheeks as she wagged slow. True. Love, we aimed to share. But spans flew, and timing fled. Emily's stems buckled. She clawed blind for seat, overshot and reeled back till wall met. The thump on plaster boomed room. 2 years old, she breathed. All this span, I ne'er. Your birthkin couldn't tend. I pressed, draftsman's trim aiding this crux unveil. Aid folk cited you with us for claim. We bonded instant we spied you, timid, we, hugging a threadbare bear. Edward's smug mask gone full. He sat stock in my seat, grasping he'd wedged a weave knottier than dreamed. 28 years. I've sired you willed, not writ. Timbre affirmed per phrase. Each dusk I patrolled your slumbers when priors haunted. Each graze I rapped. Each stage I cheered, each glee in your climbs, none bloodbound. Emily slithered wall-to-floor seat, her posh garb creased, coif tousled. You willed me. Each dawn, I crouched by, knees moaning. At 4, spooked by bed beasts. At 13, globe crushed o'er Jake Ellis blind. At Unicap, ringing weep joy. Each dawn I willed sire, she peered up through streams ousting ire. But Edward, his coin, I nodded slighted draft. He tossed coin, I forged life, tag, clan, self. I gifted 28 years cherishing a child no kin, save what tallies. Laura neared, streams unchecked. We mulled sharing oft. Keen post-rift, but you wrestled clan shifts, and we shunned fresh scar. Edward voiced at last. Sans prior boom, I lacked word. Emily ne'er, for she lacked, I said plain. None sans kin knew bar scribes and aids. Hush-bound, to globe, Emily our blood bloom. Emily stretched shaky pads to graze the welt her swipe etched my jowl. You took my strike. Let me dub you bust. Deem you no true sire, to grasp true siring or a blood fluke. I snared her palm soft. Edward wed your dam and netted you tag on. I willed you pre-sight, blind. Soul, 'cause you craved clan. The draft rustled vent hush, absurd keen in our unveil ring. All Edward's hoard. Strut shows. Nil 'gainst decades willed bond. Emily gawked me fresh-orbed. Mayhap first sighting the chap who battled claim. Cherished sans debt. Yielded and stowed and fretted, and hailed each life crest he'd willed tend. I swatted my rescuer from cradle void. She breathed. Strike's full load perching shoulders. Emily held floor long minutes. Weeps soul breach in thick quiet. I crouched near as she sifted 28 years new-framed. Laura lingered close. Dam pull clashing doubt on soothe for spawn whose realm just cracked. Even Edward sat mute. Strut flat gone, at length. Emily raised streak face to mine. All spans. You held mum on no blood, yet cherished still. You ne'er lacked my blood. I mended soft. You forged mine inking claim writs. Blood starts, love kin makes, she labored to knees, then grazed the welt with quake pads. Oh, what wrought pardon? Dad rang fresh, weighed with grasp or casual shrug. You cherished sans blood writ. She pressed, timbre cracking phrases. Willed me when birthkin couldn't. Spared me. Whate'er loomed sans your pull. I hauled her up, joints griping, core feathered light first in ages. You've my spawn. Emily, she flung limbs round desperate keen, clasp of near-lost prize just grasped anew. So sorry. I stacked you 'gainst him like coin love, like yield care same, o'er her pauldron. Edward sat stock in my throne, draft yet board visible, slighted by all his wealth, strut bids, couldn't match the weld of decades willed yield. Can you pardon? Emily breathed, shoulder nestled. The swat, the barbs, for blind to your true gift, naught to pardon. I hushed, stroking locks as her small frights. Your kin means cherish, even forgot who we to each. Laura closed in, streams easing. We should have voiced years fled, feared it'd shift your sight on us, on self. Emily drew back to peer twixt us. It shifts, swells all grander, deeper. You needn't cherish, yet willed. She wheeled on Edward, who traced cloth uneasy keen. Sorry for your spot. Sought coin from both blind to what I sought true. He bobbed taut, lost in field tides. The draft yours if venture calls. Emily eyed the sheetboard. Then me. Reckon I pass now. Not that way. She paused, phrasing wary. Mayhap scale small. Forge own sans quick paths. Pride bloomed chest. Not gambler's proof, but still joy and loved one's sage turn. Your sire beams that call. Laura hushed. First 4 years. She meant me clear. The slant beam wheeled panes, fresh umbras o'er chamber where much cracked and reforged. The Joe blot cloth bound permanent. I marked, but it had badged the noon we reclaimed paths. Emily stepped embrace back. Palm mine kept. Grasp this men's not instant. 28 years took your cherish granted to repay. Time's ours. I said plain. Kin grants that. Flub and retry. Edward rasped, throat clumsy. Best roll homeward. Yield you pair room to hash. Emily bobbed, then turned him kind true. Thanks for venture aid, Will, and for showing what I sought in sire. I held it. As they readied quit, Emily clasped me linger sans edge prior. Happy Father's Day. Dad, she breathed, my true sire. The hold felt altered post-depart, not void but serene. I swabbed the Joe blot, stowed where, paced slow, relishing hush. The draft held board where Edward left, but shrank now, lesser weight. Morrow Emily rings, and we launch mend of near-lost weave. But this eve I'd thrown my seat, and hold the heft of girls' limbs round me. The chime of Dad fresh grasped what word weighs true. As the sun dipped low over my quiet home, I felt a warmth return, one built not from grand gestures, but from the simple truth of chosen family. Emily's hug lingered in my bones, a promise of mended paths ahead. In that moment, I knew real fathers don't just provide, they endure, they love, they choose every day. What touched you most in this story? Share your impressions in the comments below. Did it stir memories of your own family bonds? Drop a question here, and let's exchange thoughts together. Your voice keeps this channel alive. Interact, subscribe, and let's build more stories side by side. For the next tale, click the box on the left. Thank you for joining me.